special treat for you. Brother Sam here is going to give his short version of his testimony. He has a short and a long, and I'll tell you what, he could probably go on and on and on. He's also going to sing us a song. There's going to be some pictures of his horrific accident on the screen up here to display exactly, to show you what has happened to him and why he is so blessed to be where he is right now. I'll put it that way. You know something, the Lord can get you down, or you can be getting down, but the Lord's always going to pick you up.
It's a holiday weekend and I'm driving to the store. I pull into the parking lot and see it's filled with crowds of people and cars in almost every spot. I begin to circle around and I look to my right and then to my left. I do not see any spaces open close to the entrance. I glance to the right again and there beside me is a handicap spot. I contemplate in my mind, do I pull in? Then I realize I'm in my grandma's van and I have a handicap tag. So I should hang it in the rearview mirror. No one would ever know. I'm only going to be in there for a minute. I look outside the window and notice the snow begins to fall as I hear the wind rattling the windows of the van. I don't want to walk that far in the bitter cold weather. It brought me back to 12 years ago when I was 12 years old, on January 22nd, 1996. It was a cold winter day in Connecticut. I just got home from school. I sat at the table, ready to do my homework when the phone rings. It's my grandma. I could hear the panic in her voice as she asked for my mom or dad. She began to tell me that my 18-year-old uncle had been in a serious car accident. His pickup truck was hit by a garbage truck. I frantically gave the phone to my dad. My hands were shaking and tears were running down my face. My mom was weeping. We packed our things as quickly as we could and headed to Michigan. That's where he lived. I remember my mom weeping and praying the entire time, that long 12-hour drive. I just sat in the back seat hoping that it was all a dream. We were all wondering if he was going to be okay. As we entered the hospital, our entire family was there. I never forget the look of grief on my grandma's face as she walked into the intensive care unit waiting room. This was her baby of 8 children and the only boy. What was she going to do if she lost him? I remember her concern as to what was going to happen to his 2-month-old twin boys. We just embraced each other and wept. I knew at the moment that this was real and that things did not look good. His injuries were so severe that the doctors did not expect him to live through the night. This was not just an uncle to me. He had lived with us for several years. He was more like a brother. As I walked into his room with my mom, my heart dropped. My uncle was lying there with so many tubes and machines hooked up to him. My mom sat next to him and held his hand. I remember sitting at the foot of his bed, afraid to touch him. I didn't want to cause him any more pain. I was staring at him, looking so helpless, trying hard to hold back my tears. I heard my mom say, "Sam, it's Kim. Can you hear me, Sam?" Sabrina's here too. At the time, a nurse came in and said, "There is very little brain activity. He can't hear you. He's in a coma." Just then, I looked at my uncle's face, and with his eyes still closed, they moved. It appeared that he was trying to open them and look at us. I knew at that point, no matter what the doctor said, there is still hope. Day after day, week after week went by and still no progress. The day came 6 weeks later when he woke up. The doctors were very shocked, but still insisted that he would be a vegetable for the rest of his life. He was completely paralyzed on the left side and had severe brain damage. They said he would never walk or talk again. He was moved to the step unit down where he was still making progress. We waited by his side day by day to talk to him. As my mom talked to him and said, "Sam, if you can hear me, please show me somehow, please." At that moment, he blinked his eyes. He began answering yes and no by blinking his eyes, once for yes and twice for no. The doctors told us that he wasn't really answering us. They said sometimes you just hope so much that you imagine things happening. But in fact, it was truly happening. He continued to make more progress as we squeezed our hands. When we were talking to him, I can just hear the doctor's voice in my head. He will never walk or talk again. Shortly after that, the hospital told us that we had to find somewhere else to put him. They suggested a nursing home. My grandparents said that they would take him home before they would put him there. After several days of searching, my grandparents found a rehabilitation center that would agree to take him. He stayed there for 4 months, where he made great progress. He learned to give the thumbs up or down for yes or no. He even attempted to write by drawing circles and lines. I thought in my mind, how can you say that he will be a vegetable when he can comprehend everything we are saying to him? On July 3rd, he was released to go home, where according to the doctors, he would live in a hospital bed for the rest of his life. He could not talk because he still had a trach in and had a feeding tube in. He still had no movement on his left side. He couldn't even turn his head to the left. I remember putting all of his pictures and cards on the right side so he could see them. Not one moment did his grandparents give up hope. Even through the emotional stress of Sam's wife abandoning him and his boys, Sam could have easily given up. Instead, he pushed even harder because he wanted to be there to see his boys grow up. Sam's only way of communication was writing on a dry erase board. I remember the day when he began to talk. Even with the trach in, we all ran into the room with excitement. He began like an infant, saying simple words like Mom and Dad and his sister's names. Constantly working with him, his speech continued to grow through the care of the entire family and the rehabilitation facility, and after several operations, Sam was able to move and speak. The trach and the feeding tube were removed, and he began to speak, eat, and drink on his own. At this point, he was wheelchair bound. Anyone that knows my uncle knows that he loves to shop. So my grandparents, Mom, brothers, Sam, and I loaded in the van and proceeded to the mall. We parked the handicap accessible van in the handicap spot. There was a huge sticker on the side that said, "Wheelchair lift installed, do not park on this side." As we came out of the mall, we noticed that there was a vehicle parked so close to the van, we could not get Sam in. My grandpa pulled the van out in the middle of the parking lot just to make enough room for the wheelchair to get in. As I looked over with frustration, I noticed that the vehicle didn't even have a handicap sticker. I hear a horn honking as I'm sitting there looking at the spot. I say to myself, some people can't even walk. Why am I being so selfish? I'm circling the parking lot again, and finally I found a space at the far end. I'm bundling myself up. I'm getting out of the van and heading towards the entrance. As I'm walking through the snow, cold and wet, I notice that in that very same spot, someone is lowering a wheelchair out of a van. Pausing as the snow is falling on my head, I watch as the young girl drives her electric wheelchair to the door. Suddenly, I'm not self-held. I think to myself, what if I had parked in that spot? I continued walking, and I look to my left as I see another car parked next to that van with a handicap sticker. Inside was an elderly man struggling to get himself out of his vehicle. I began to think back at the progress that Sam had made since then. He continued to go through physical therapy and never gave up. Even though it was difficult, Sam's strong will came through. He began walking with a walker only 3 years after the accident. I will never forget the look of joy on his face when I would watch him push that walker around. As I told you, Sam is a strong-willed man and can be stubborn at times, as you see. A walker wasn't good enough for him. He was not going to walk with a walker for the rest of his life. He's not a quitter. He kept pressing on and eventually started walking with a cane. He wanted to be a good example for his children, so he decided to go back to school to get his high school diploma. I'm so proud of him. Things may be different now, but Sam is determined that he is not going to let a garbage truck slow him down. He is not only walking with a cane, but dancing and singing for the Lord in church. I watch as the elderly man gets his walker out of the trunk. He begins to push it through the snow into the store. I quickly catch up to him, holding my umbrella over his head. He turns to me with that same look of joy on his face and thanked me continuously. As I walked away, I knew at that moment I would never think about parking in a handicapped space again. I will never forget the lesson that comes in this. Be more considerate to others, especially those with disabilities.
Praise the Lord. Sam, we weren't able to play those pictures, but maybe you could bring some pictures in, and all the people that were here got the testimony, and then they can look at the pictures after if you got the hard copy of them. That'd be great.